Hi there. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I do like it when it gets to Friday night. I've really loved teaching this whole week, but something about the Friday night, Saturday morning classes I like in particular. So I just want us to spend a little bit of time. I just want to check, actually, I'm hoping you can hear me. Yeah. Just preparing what you need for this class. I think some props would come in handy. I would suggest if you've got 2 yoga bricks or something equivalent, so 2 books of more or less the same thickness, that would be good. You might like to have something to lift your arms up into in sphinx, so maybe a bolster or a cushion. And then do have a blanket and maybe something to sit on. So if you haven't already gathered all your stuff, if you'd like to do that. And I'm quite chilly up in my attic, so I've got slippers on and all sorts today. It's a bit odd, really, it's sort of middle of June, but for those of you at co-housing, those houses are really warm. So I knew that, but it's quite funny feeling cold in a house in summer. But it's great as well, it's lovely here. So I advertise this class as quite a deep hip release class, and that is exactly what we're going to do. Sometimes, and you will have noticed if you've been becoming regularly, or also if you're a teacher yourself, I lead up with some preparatory poses before coming into like a big pose, as I would call them. But today we're going to just allow time to do the work. So we're going to come straight into some quite deep hip releasing poses. And I'm going to talk through the practice. I'm going to read some poetry. It's not a fluffy practice. There's not that many postures. But there's an overall invitation for this class, because when we work into the hips, it can get quite sticky. I did this practice myself earlier this afternoon, and it can be really quite uncomfortable unless your hips are already very open. If you're hypermobile, you'd want to back off in this practice a little bit. But if you meet what I met this afternoon, which is quite a lot of stickiness, quite a lot of psychological as well as physical resistance, there's different things you can do, and the invitation would be to see what happens when you just allow everything to be as it is. So this is a metaphor obviously for discomfort off the mat as well, or challenge off the mat. And you will have heard me say it in yin classes before, but explore in particular with this class what it's like to become very intimate with sensation and very intimate with any emotional stuff that might come up as well. It might not for you. And by staying with something rather than avoiding it, maybe noticing what happens as you pass through onto the other side. I think you'll know what I mean when we come into some of the poses. So that's lovely. If you'd like to take an easy seat if you're not already there, making sure that you're able to, just for this settling few moments, feel a release down through the pelvis, a release down through the hips. And I hope you're warm enough, because we're going to be very still in this practice. They're going to be quite long holds. And then maybe close your eyes. And take a few moments to arrive in your body. Maybe you've had a busy day. Just arriving and landing And seeing if you can pour your attention into physical felt sensation. What does it feel like right now to inhabit this body? And as you continue to settle, just feeling in, noticing a natural breath for now. I'll read one of several poems I'm going to read tonight. It only takes a reminder to breathe, a moment to be still. And just like that, something in me settles, softens, makes space for imperfection. The harsh voice of judgment drops to a whisper. And I remember again that life isn't a relay race, that we will all cross the finish line, that waking up to life is what we were born for. As many times as I forget, catch myself charging forward without even knowing where I'm going, that many times I can make the choice to stop, to breathe and be, and walk slowly into the mystery. So that's Walk Slowly by Dana Fowles. And for the next few moments, sitting here together, can you begin to possibly notice a stillness in your being? Even if your mind is racing, even if your body isn't necessarily comfortable, is there a still place behind all the activity that maybe you can just get a glimpse of, just get a little taste of? And becoming particularly soft in the face. And really continuing to release down through the hips, and not, although your spine is straight, not being too rigid here. So maybe softening back a little in the side waist. And then seeing what it might feel like to soften in the roof, the palate of your mouth. Almost as if there's a very gentle lift up through the palate of your mouth. And it may be that this does nothing for you, or it may be that you experience a little bit more release in the jaw. And it may be that you notice simultaneously a little bit of softening down through the pelvis and the hips. And then from this softness, from this stillness, setting yourself, if you'd like to, a particular focus for your practice, an intention, a sankalpa. So maybe when things do get a little bit sticky, if they do, you can remind yourself, you can come back. You can come back to your sankalpa. And then gently opening your eyes. Hello. We'll come into two poses which we would typically start a yin class with. So we'll start with a butterfly pose, which is already a gentle hip opener. And you might be sitting up on your cushion or your block. You want to be able to sit in front of the sitting bones. You might want to find those. And then your feet are together, the soles are together about 2 hand lengths from the groin. So already in this pose, if you know you're hypermobile in your hips, you might want to just prop yourself up with bricks like this so you don't open too wide. So hypermobility is not my problem. So I'm taking the bricks to one side. And then taking your hands to your shins. You should be able to really feel your sitting bones. And we're going to take 5 minutes in butterfly. So take a breath in and find a gentle lift of the spine up and out of the pelvis. And then as you breathe out, you come all the way down. And it may be that you like to have a bolster or a brick to take your head on. So I've put a brick on my feet so I can rest my forehead there, but it's not necessary. And take some time to feel into the pose. Take some time to really feel the skin of the whole body. And how your skin and other tissues in the body respond to butterfly. It's quite nice to turn the palms up in this pose, just to add to a sense of vulnerability, receptivity. You may already begin to feel a very subtle and gentle sense of letting go. Bringing your attention lovingly to the breath. I will be guiding you through a breathing practice, but for now, simply notice the body breathing. Notice where you feel it, its quality, the difference between the inhale and the exhale. And most important of all throughout this practice is to keep bringing yourself back to the present, keep bringing yourself back to the felt experience of sensation, even in the midst of a racing mind. Giving yourself permission in this practice to let things be just as they are, to be okay, just as they are. You may notice now that we've been here for 3 minutes that the time and gravity is already working. You may already notice that you're melting a little bit more. And if you're not, you're aware of where there is restriction. And you might want to invite a little bit of softness into the heart where you encounter restriction. Stay very, very close. I'm going to say that many times. Become really very, very intimate with your practice, with the breath, with every molecule of sensation. For the final 40 seconds or so of this pose, you might want to breathe a little bit deeper. And in every pose, I invite you, if you want to breathe out with a sigh as we come towards the end of the pose. Feeling that dissolving, that pouring out of just what you don't need anymore, letting go. And then coming to one final inhalation and a long sigh of an exhalation. And we're going to come out slow with a little bit of engagement of your abdominal muscles. Begin to reassemble your spine as you come all the way up. Don't be in any hurry. And you can bring your knees together and take your legs out in front of you. And just lean back on your hands for a moment to experience what I've described in earlier classes as being the rebound, like the residue. Some of the energy that's been condensed in parts of the body recirculates. You might feel a tingling down your legs to your toes, you might not. And then we're going to come to another quite neutral pose before we get into the sticky business. And that is sphinx. So sphinx is when we come onto our belly. And this is where you might want to use, you might want to use a bolster to place your forearms on, or a block. So if you come onto your belly and when you place your elbows underneath your shoulders, your legs can be apart and really relaxed. Your buttocks can be relaxed as well. If you bring your elbows underneath your shoulders and that already pinches the lower back, then I'd like you to come down a little bit because we're going to stay 5 minutes again. Otherwise, your forearms are parallel, palms might be together if you prefer. And this is where you decide if there's just not much going on for you and you want to feel more of a compression in the lower spine. You could raise your forearms onto something out in front of you. Take your time to settle into this pose. Lovely to see so many of you here tonight. If you're somebody who finds there is a little bit too much compression in the lower back, you can create a little bit of space there by drawing your tailbone towards your heels and even engaging your lower belly ever so slightly. You can experiment with that. Otherwise, you can literally just hang out here, allowing the shoulder blades, the shoulders to just melt down the spine. And see what it feels like to release in the jaw again by releasing up through the palate of your mouth, the roof of your mouth. And if you have got a very racy mind today, I would recommend bringing Ujjayi breath in. So this slight constriction at the back of the throat, so you feel an ocean breath in your skull, a resonance of sound that will keep you a little bit more focused, and it makes the breath a little bit deeper. Doesn't work for everybody. And then something else you can do to add to this focus is to count your breaths. So see what it feels like for you. You can experiment and then take it or leave it. Experiment with counting in for 5 and counting out for 5. Maybe with that Ujjayi breath, maybe not. And then finally, you could also bring a direction into the breath. So you gather your attention at the heart space. And when you breathe in for 5, take your attention down the front of your spine to your pelvic floor, where you pause, and the exhalation almost feels like a little bounce off the pelvic floor as you count for 5 back up to the heart space. Just see how that works for you. See how it settles. And coming back to that stillness in between and behind thoughts. Stay very, very close to the breath, very, very close to sensation. And we're coming into the final minute. You might want to come down a notch or go up a notch. And in the final 30 seconds, if you fancy breathing a bit deeper, maybe opening your mouth to sigh on the exhalation, please do. I'm just hoping you're still there because it says I've signed out of here. I don't understand. Interesting. I'm taking one final inhalation. And then as you exhale, come down to lie on your belly. Hands underneath your forehead. And take a few slightly deeper breaths into the belly. So to create space in the lower back. Thanks, Emma. Don't know what that was. The annoying thing is that it's cut off the recording. I really wanted to record this practice. I'm not quite sure what's going on. Beautiful. And then from your belly, bringing your hands down by your ribs and lifting yourself up to all fours, and maybe taking your bottom back to your heels for a little bit of a child's pose. Just allowing the buttocks, the hips to sink back towards the heels. Taking a couple of breaths here. A little bit of a counter pose, breathing into the back of the body. And then from here, coming into a soft downward dog, a really soft downward dog. We're not trying to build strength here. We're not trying to fully stretch out, but just feeling the body here. You might want to walk out your dog, nothing too rigid, a few breaths. And the first deep hip opener that we're going to come to is pigeon. So if you know that you can't do pigeon because you have pain in your knees, because we're going to stay for 5 minutes, which is quite intense, I'll show you a version on your backs. But for those of you who can come to pigeon on the front, come down to all fours first, and then take your right knee outside the right hand, and slide the left leg out behind you. And just look over your left shoulder to see that the leg isn't veering out towards the left, but is directly behind you. And then you can take your foreleg as far up the mat as works for you, but please don't tolerate any pain in the knee. And then I'm not going to get it, but if you had a cushion or a bolster, you could bring it underneath your chest and your belly. I'll show you in a moment. And then just for a few breaths, let's stay here. Let's stay here before we come down and sleep. And I'll demonstrate the pigeon on the back for those people who find pigeon on the front just really quite inaccessible. I'm already warming up here, so it can't be that cold. Pigeon on the back is where you take your right ankle over the left knee, and then you draw your legs in towards you. You could take the right hand through the gap, wrap it around behind the thigh or over the shin with the left hand. And it's essentially the same pose. Whether you're on your back or your front, you can always flex the right foot to engage the, to protect the tissues of the right knee. So here I've got the bolster underneath my belly, which is just really nice if you want to make it restorative. But if you want a full deep hip release, it's better to do pure yin rather than the restorative. And then coming down into your sleeping pigeon. And taking a while, so I've just put on the timer for 5 minutes. Taking a while to come in. You don't need to come down fully. You might be on your forearms. You might even rest your head in your hands. We're looking for sensation down the outside of your right thigh, coming right into the right hip and the right buttock. And take a moment to notice if, even at the beginning of this pose, you begin to grip a little in your shoulders, in your jaw, and you can invite a little bit of softness there. And then bringing your attention to the breath. And if you liked the Ujjayi breath and you liked the count, you like that direction, then bring that back in, maybe starting at the heart space and breathing in for 5 down the spine to the pelvic floor, and then out for 5 as you come back up. So this for some people will not feel like anything very much, and for others it will feel really, really intense. And all I'd like to say is, as long as there's no pain in the knee, the intensity of sensation around the right hip is a wonderful thing to work through. So it might sound sadistic. But what happens if you stay with the discomfort rather than running away from it? What happens if you say to yourself, almost like a witness, there is discomfort, there is intense sensation. How does that change your experience of it? Can you keep releasing up through the roof of your mouth as you soften? And incidentally, what I should have said, if you're somebody who's on your back and it's just not even possible to draw the legs in with the two hands, you can do that pose against a wall so that your left foot would be against the wall and your right ankle be over the left knee. And that is already enough. Should have said that. If you want to try that now or when we come to the other side, we've got 1 more minute. Stay close. And in the final 30 seconds, if you like, you deepen the breath and you sigh out your exhalations. Wonderful. 1 more full inhalation and a long exhalation. And with a little bit of engagement again in your abdomen, straightening up your arms. If you're on your back, rolling over to all fours. And then you can draw that left knee forwards a little bit and bring yourself into a downward dog, if that's right for you, or you could just circle your hips on all fours if you don't want to come into downward dog. And this might be a time that you want to have a little groan, a little sigh, because 5 minutes in pigeon is intense by any standard. So take a few breaths and notice how the body feels and how it's different on each side. And then dropping your knees again. If you're coming onto your back, come onto your back. And we take the left knee just outside the left hand, right over on the left side of the mat. Just look over your right shoulder to make sure that the leg is extended, straight. And decide how far up the mat you're going to bring your left shin, but in such a way that there's absolutely no pain in the knee. Remember, you can always flex the toes a little bit to support the knee. Take a few breaths here, just dropping into the hips. And then maybe onto a cushion or not, coming down to sleep in your pigeon. Maybe start on the forearms if that's right for you. I better put the timer on. And take this first minute of the pose to find yourself. Find yourself in the experience of the pose, coming to your breath. I'm going to read a poem by David Whyte. I quite often read David Whyte's poems just because I think he's a bit fantastic, actually. And it's called Start Close In. Start close in. Don't take the second step or the third. Start with the first thing close in, the step you don't want to take. Start with the ground you know, the pale ground beneath your feet, your own way to begin the conversation. Start with your question. Give up on other people's questions. Don't let them smother something simple. To hear another's voice, follow your own voice. Wait until that voice becomes an intimate, private ear that can really listen to another. Start right now. Take a small step you can call your own. Don't follow someone else's heroics. Be humble and focused. Start close in. Don't mistake that other for your own. Start close in. Don't take the second step or the third. Start with the first thing, close in, the step you don't want to take. So we're halfway through the pose on this side. Are you able to observe and to witness the intensity of sensation at the same time as being in it? I know that sounds like a contradiction. I'm asking you to fully experience something right in the heart of it at the same time as being able to step back a little without investing too much emotion, too much thought in what's going on. There is discomfort, there is intensity. And see what that little bit of distance creates in terms of a shift in your experience, perhaps. All of this is great training for how we deal with difficult times, difficult things off the yoga mat. Notice if you're gripping in the jaw or behind your eyes. Staying very intimate to the breath. Maybe you're still breathing your ujjayi, maybe you're still counting. We're coming into the final minute. One of the reasons for inviting you to witness sensation is because more often than not, when we have an experience, we start off with a direct experience, a kind of unadulterated sensational perception. But then our mind starts weaving stories and overcomplicating, even intensifying more the experience. And we can stop that. We can just meet sensation where it's at. So you're coming into your final 30 seconds. If you'd like to maybe breathe a little deeper. Maybe take a few sighs with an open mouth, just to feel that dissolving, that rinsing away as you let go a little bit deeper. One more full inhalation and a long exhalation. And then when you're ready, slight engagement of your abdominal muscles. If you're on your back, rolling over to all fours. And then finding your way either to all fours to circle your hips or into a soft and gentle downward dog. Breathe and let go. Any groaning, any moaning, anything you want, any just deep sense of relief and release. And then we come down onto our knees again. And this is when you might want to have a brick on either side of the mat, but you not necessarily, so it's not essential. And bringing your right foot forwards. So we're going to take a couple of little dragons, which are a fantastic way of getting even deeper into the hips here. And I want you to make sure that your knee is either a little bit forward from the ankle or over the ankle. You don't want it to be coming back. And then make sure your left knee is in the right place. You might want to drag it back a little. If you're on a hard surface, I would fold up the left side of your mat so that your knee has a little bit of a cushion there, because it's quite intense. We're going to stay for 3 minutes here. And this is where you might want your hands on on blocks or bricks, unless it's comfortable for you to bring your hands down. And see if you can have a sensation of your right sitting bone pulling towards your right heel. Your right sitting bone pulling towards your right heel. And then begin to drop into the right hip in particular. But obviously we're also opening into the front of the left and the thigh. And you can stay here. If you want to intensify a little bit, you could bring your forearms onto the knees, a little bit more of a push, a little bit stronger. And now come to your breath. That same count, that same direction. And there's so much potential to start tensing up in the shoulders, the throat, the jaw. How much can you soften? Can you release up through the roof of your mouth? And stay very present to what's going on right now. And there's bound to be aversion, a desire to get right out as quickly as possible. So just notice what happens if you allow sensation to be just as you meet it head on. And coming into the final minute. This is hard. I think this is really hard. I find it really, really hard. And I'm doing it for the second time today now. Breathe, and you're coming into the final 30 seconds. So whatever you want to do with your breath, I won't repeat those instructions, just whatever you want to do. The thing is with these deep hip releases, that they can feel intense and not necessarily pleasurable at the time, but it can feel so fantastic afterwards. And it's also a great lesson in so many things about how we encounter challenge. One more full inhalation and a long exhalation. We're not going to come right out of this pose because we're going to come into another version, but if you'd like to just draw the right hip back a little bit, just for a little bit of relief. And then as you fold back in again, bring both hands inside the right foot, but step your right foot out a little bit, step the toes out a little bit, and your knee can fall out a little bit as well. And I find here that my left knee wants to slide further back. You see how that is for you. And we take 3 minutes here in gecko, and it may be that your arms are straight, and that's already pretty enough intense. It may be that you want to bring your forearms down onto a prop, onto a brick or a bolster. Or it may be for you that it's absolutely easy to bring your forearms all the way down to the floor. This is a very, very deep pose. Come to observe how you settle into the pose, coming back to your breath. And I'm going to leave you quietly to meet yourself. And I can assure you that I am feeling it with you. When I practiced this earlier today, it just made me want to cry after the practice. So if anything like that's happening to you, rest assured you're not the only one. But there's a great cleansing in that. Just let it happen. Allow everything to be here just as it is right now. Stay very intimate, very, very close to your breath. You're halfway through the pose. Breathe. You're coming into your final minute. Coming into your final minute. Stay very, very close. In your final 30 seconds, so doing whatever works for you with the breath, whatever feels the most release. And taking one full inhalation and a long exhalation. And it's going to be quite a gentle job here to come out. So very, very slowly. Don't be in any hurry to bring your right knee back. And there's different things you can do here. You might want to simply stay on all fours or come down on your forearms because your hips will be speaking to you. You might like to come into a downward dog, or you might like to rest back into pose of the child. To experience the rebound, to experience the residue of two intense poses. Wonderful. And then we take both of those to the other side. So bringing your left foot forwards. If you need to, rolling over the right side of your mat to cushion your right knee. And taking a little bit of time to line yourself up. You might be using bricks. Remember that the left knee shouldn't be coming back behind the ankle, but it could be a little bit forwards or on top of the ankle. Maybe sliding your right knee back a bit. And then having that sensation of the left sitting bone drawing towards the left heel, just a little bit. Obviously this isn't literal, but it gives you a certain quality of the pose. And I'm putting on the timer for 3 minutes. And you could start with your hands on bricks or on the floor, and it will feel different on each side. It's very strange what we come together to do on a Friday night. This really, I think hip work in yin is a form of sadism, but one with a very happy outcome, I hope, for you. If this is enough for you with your hands down, stay down, or maybe come up to take your forearms or your hands onto the left knee. Just gives you a little bit more of an opening here on the right as well. And observe what's going on. Allow yourself to, we could say, experience an undoing. So we're not really doing anything, but we're going into a deep unraveling, undoing of years, decades of tension. For some people, there may be emotional trauma that is held in the hips. It might not be you. But it can only be good to let that go. And breathe. Stay with it. With that intimacy, with that compassion, that non-judgment. You soften in the neck and the throat and the shoulders. I've got one more minute here. And coming towards the final 30 seconds, so choose what you'd like to do with the breath. And taking one full inhalation and a long exhalation. And without coming out of the pose, just ease that left hip back a little bit, just to relieve all that intensity before we come into gecko. So for gecko, your left foot can just point out a little bit to the left and the knee as well. Maybe your right knee drags back a little bit. Maybe it's enough for you to stay up on your hands, straight arms, because it's intense. Maybe you bring your forearms down onto whatever prop is handy for you. Or maybe you come all the way down to the floor. And allow yourself to sink right into the pose. And breathe. It is really, really hard. It's really intense. Stay very close. It's a very deep practice, this, I think. In many of you will have come across this, but in a lot of yoga and meditation teachings, there's an analogy that's sometimes used of a TV screen or a cinema screen, and the relationship between the screen, which is always there, and all of the images and activities that move across the screen is one that's used to explore the relationship between the flux of our minds, the objects that we think are important in life, we think are permanent, and this backdrop, this screen of space and emptiness, which is always there even when the images stop. And you probably know, if you've been meditating for a while or you've been practicing yoga for a while, that we have access to that empty screen. We have access to the stillness and the space there. The stillness and the space that lies behind all the objects that we identify with. And actually that's, although we don't always say this explicitly, this is what we're doing in these practices. We're finding bigger gaps between the objects, bigger gaps between the thoughts, the identification with discomfort, with difficulty, to access a stillness and a spaciousness that's always there, whatever else is going on. And coming into your final 30 seconds of gecko. Doing whatever you want to do with the breath. And the lovely thing, and taking a final inhalation and a long exhalation. And then very gently, very carefully, bringing yourself out and choosing whatever you want to do in order to be able to absorb the after effects. It might be simply staying on all fours, maybe a very gentle circle, maybe settling back for a very light child's pose, or come into a downward dog, whatever's right for you. Yeah, what I was going to say was that one of the wonderful things about yoga is because it is a physical practice, or at least the asana, what we're doing now. If you're somebody who just absolutely loves the physical experience of yoga, but you don't really have a lot of interest in the philosophy and some of the ideas that I'm talking about, it's absolutely okay. You know it feels good. You know it feels good in your body. It probably stills the mind. And there's no need to go into all of the other stuff. And then sometimes, because we do feel so good, we start asking questions about that, and it then maybe takes us, if you're interested, into some of the ideas. What is that quality of spaciousness and stillness that we seem to like? Wonderful. Okay, and then from here we're going to come to shoelace or cow face legs. You might need a cushion or a blanket for this. I'm going to start today with both legs extended. And we're coming back to 5-minute pose. Both legs extended, and can you take the left knee over the right knee so that your left foot comes outside the right hip? And it may be for you that this is where you're going to stay in a half shoelace position. And it may be that you need to take a blanket or a cushion if your knees don't stack nicely, just so you've got something to settle into. If you're able to, you're going to bend the right knee and bring the right foot outside the left hip. So what's essential is that you feel both sitting bones. If you're all hitched up and rocking over to one side, please extend the right leg and come into the half version. And you might also want to be sitting up on something. That's totally fine. And then take a few moments here. You might feel this sense of dropping down into the hips. Come to your breath. And if this is already quite intense enough, stay where you are. Or if you wanted to just accentuate sensation in the hips a little bit, you could come forwards. But as you come forwards, I don't want you to lift your bottom up. So you would come forwards and press a little into your fingertips or your hands, so to keep that connection back to your sitting bones. And then come to your breath. Are you still breathing ujjayi with that light constriction in the back of the throat? Can you observe where you're holding on, if you're gripping onto anything? This particular pose, and I always say it because it's so good for me, is working directly with the liver and gallbladder organs and the meridians according to traditional Chinese medicine. And these, the qualities when things are a little bit out of balance or not nourished enough of these meridians and organs, are anger and frustration. So if you're experiencing anything like that right now, it's a great opportunity to accept and to go through the other side. And it may be that you've got very healthy liver, gallbladder, and it's just not relevant. But it's something that crops up for some of us who are a bit liverish. I've just seen that you're here, Faye. I didn't think you were here. I can't believe it's happened again. This practice has got your name on it, Faye. So you've got 2 more minutes. Again, for many people, this is a really intense pose. You really feel it going right into the sides of your buttocks and hips. More so on the left side, probably. Staying very, very close, very present. And sense of the whole body letting go. The whole body descending, sinking. And we have the opportunity to hold a pose for 5 minutes like this. It's just, well, I find it fascinating how everything changes during the 5 minutes in terms of my state of mind, quality of breath, the way in which sensations are distributed around the body, the way softness begins to pervade everywhere. Coming into the final 30 seconds. Use the breath. And taking one final inhalation and a long exhalation. And very, very slowly, if you're folded over, coming up. And taking your hands behind you as you release your legs. And you can lean back a little bit here. And just take a moment. Don't be in too much of a hurry to shake anything out, because you just really want to stay with what's ever present, observing the flow of energy. And then you can bend up your knees. Your feet are about hip distance apart or a bit more. And then just very gently windshield wiper your knees from one side to another. And you can sigh. So because I did the practice earlier today, it's not quite as intense the second time around, but really, really, if you haven't been doing hip openers for a while, you'll feel this practice. Okay, and then we're going to take the pose to the other side. So you can start with your left leg extended and bring the right knee over the top. And this may be where you want to stay, coming forwards a little for half shoelace. Or if you're able to, wrapping the left foot around so that both of your knees are stacked. And remember, you can always use a cushion here, a blanket here. And you want to be able to feel both sitting bones. Lovely. And then decide if you want to stay a while just settling with an upright torso, or at some stage if you want to come down. But don't be in any hurry. 5 minutes is a long time, so we have time. This is the last really intense pose, by the way. if you're wondering if you can hack anymore. So folding over whenever's right for you. Incidentally, it's quite nice to also bring a block forwards if your forearms don't reach the floor. And coming to your breath. I'm going to read, I'm not sure if it's a poem or just a paragraph. It's by Wendell Berry, North American poet, and it's called The Unforeseen Wilderness, Kentucky's Red River Gorge. Always in big woods, when you leave familiar ground and step off alone into a new place, there will be, along with the feelings of curiosity and excitement, a little nagging of dread. It's the ancient fear of the unknown, and it's your first bond with the wilderness you are going into. You're undertaking the first experience, not of the place, but of yourself in that place. It is an experience of our essential loneliness, for nobody can discover the world for anybody else. It is only after we have discovered it for ourselves that it becomes a common ground and a common bond, and we cease to be alone. And the world cannot be discovered by a journey of miles, no matter how long, but only by a spiritual journey, a journey of 1 inch, very arduous and humbling and joyful, by which we arrive at the ground at our feet and learn to be at home. Staying very, very close to sensation, to your breath. Making sure that you're as relaxed and as released in the mouth and the jaws as possible. The back of the neck and the shoulders and the back of the ribs. And maybe here, even here, with the intensity, you're able to catch a glimpse of the screen upon which images, objects are projected, but that's there even when there are no objects and no images. That inner stillness, that inner spaciousness, that's our birthright. And we're coming to the final 30 seconds. If you'd like to maybe use those 30 seconds to deepen the breath, sigh on the exhalation. And taking one final full inhalation and a long exhalation. And then in your own time, slowly straightening up if you're bent forwards. And release your legs. Leaning back into your hands and actually lifting the chest a little now. So you really squeeze the shoulder blades together. And allow all that life to tingle in your legs all the way down to your toes. And then when you're ready, bending your knees up, feet apart, and taking a few windshield wiper movements. It should feel like quite a relief. And we have only one pose left with a variation before we rest. And that is dragonfly. So dragonfly is legs out wide, and I'm going to sit up on a blanket actually. So you might want to just sit up on something to make it a little bit easier for your pelvis. And the legs need to be soft and floppy, but as wide apart as is comfortable without any strain. Now, some people will need to bend the knees up, and you can even place cushions underneath the knees. So we're looking to release the pelvis a little bit forwards. And then we're going to actually take, it's a form of lateral dragonfly. It's a little bit of a dragonfly with a twist. So if you'd like to just move your torso around to the right so that your right hand is behind you, and your left hand could be inside the right leg or on the right leg. It's not the biggest twist you've ever come to, but it's quite an interesting position, and that in this twist, maybe you can feel a releasing down a little bit deeper into your hips, and we stay 3 minutes on each side. It can take a while to settle, I find, in this pose, because it feels like more should be going on, but actually there's a lot going on. Notice sensation in the body as you release down, shoulders soft, jaw soft, hips soft. And then come to the simplicity of your breath. Maybe you're still counting. Maybe you're following that direction as you breathe in, down from the heart to the pelvic floor. Pausing and then up from the pelvic floor to the heart. Maybe with a count. Softening, softening, softening. I find in this pose that I have a heightened perception of the space around me. I don't know if you'll agree. A sense of the quality in the room, the atmosphere in the room. Stay very close to the breath, very close to sensation. And we're coming towards the final 30 seconds. Breathe. And then gently coming back to the front, taking a moment to feel. And then turning yourself around over the left leg. Then you're coming as far around with your hands with the spine as is right for you. And really releasing down through the hips, the sitting bones. Your legs are completely floppy and relaxed. You're not drawing the toes towards you. So we're not engaging any muscles in the legs. A little bit of core strength just because we're upright. And breathe. Where might you be holding on, and where might you surrender? Using your breath to surrender and let go. Surrendering into that spaciousness that I've been talking about. Or not. If you just want to experience the physical sensations in the body, that's excellent. Keep releasing, keep softening down through the bottom of your pelvis. Feeling the breath, feeling the space around you. And all that intimacy. Very, very soft in the face now. The roof of your mouth. Coming to your final 30 seconds, doing whatever you like to do with the breath. And taking a full inhalation and a long exhalation. And gently coming back round to the front. And we're going to come forwards, and it may be that this is where you need to bend your knees up. It may be that you want a bolster here in the front or a block for your head. But taking a breath in and coming forwards for you might mean staying up like this, or even taking your hands behind you just to help you with the tilt of your pelvis. Or you might come down a little way. We're not forcing or pushing anything. Maybe you're somebody who can lie with your belly on the floor and fall asleep like this. And we take 3 minutes here. This is our final pose before relaxation. How much now can you soften completely? I would let go of the Ujjayi breathing if you're still breathing Ujjayi and come to a very simple feather light breath. And soften in between the ribs. Staying very intimate, very close to the breath. Every exhalation, a surrender a little bit deeper into quietness, stillness. You're coming towards your final 30 seconds now, so whatever you like to do with the breath. Taking a full breath in and a long breath out. And if you're folded forwards, a little bit of engagement with your abdominal muscles and straightening the arms as you reassemble your spine. And take a moment here, maybe taking your hands behind you, lifting your chest again, squeezing your shoulder blades together, until you're ready to use your fingers to draw your knees in. I'm going to lie down. A couple of things I'm going to ask you to do before we settle into Shavasana, but have a blanket handy to make sure you're warm. And as you come to lying down, can you take your feet mat distance apart and allow the knees to rock in, drop into the center so that they're touching? We've done a lot of external rotation of the hips, and this is just a very gentle internal rotation. Have your hands on your belly. You soften down through the back of your body. And then very, very gently allow your right knee to slide down inside the left thigh. And as this happens, eventually both knees will come down to the left. And you can pause here, take a couple of breaths here, before you start moving the left knee, bringing it into the center. At the point at which your thighs begin to cross, your right knee will just automatically begin to move, and then both knees will come out to the right. And then you can pause here and just feel the pelvis, feel the body. And if you like that, you could do it again. When you've done an equal number on both sides, just coming back to the center and bringing your knees in towards you for a little bit of a hug, but keeping your lower back firmly on the floor. And then it is time for Shavasana for 5 minutes, so just spread yourself out on the mat. Make sure you're warm enough. Some people might like to take a bolster or a cushion under the knees. And allow yourself to simply bathe in sensation and to enjoy the relief, maybe, or the subtleties of energy flow in the body. And I'm going to leave you quietly. Beginning now to take a few slightly deeper breaths, maybe feeling the rise and fall of your abdomen. And bringing in any gentle movements that you like, maybe feeling into your toes, your fingers. Maybe having a little stretch, a little bit of a roll around, a little bit of a hug before you roll over to one side and meet me in a seated position, hands together in front of the heart space.